Halliburton.
Cindy Cranston.
Joanna Pipes. Michelle Powell.
And now we're going to stand for the pledge. We start everything with the pledge and the Texas pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Go ahead and
Never understand that.
I should have a copy.
Don't, I'll give mine.
Is it okay? We're going to start with you.
Mary, you got an extra agenda? Record.
Okay, first we're going to start with an update, which is the introduction of the new members, which you've done. Do y'all want to say something about yourselves so that y'all learn about each other? Or the names? Okay, let's start with Tom.
Okay, I'm Tom Robles, and I'm retired from the military, and that's basically what I know. Just how to run activities and stuff.
Lots of time in his hands, and we're taking advantage.
That's right.
There you go. Well, I'm Doug Jones, 28 years, 11 months, 7 days in Uncle Sam's Air Force. I was an aviator. Got out, when I got out, my daughter decided she wants to go to a school called Sarah Lawrence, upstate New York. It's about $35,000 a semester. The market crashed, so I went back to work in Uncle Sam's Air Force, managed the contracts for the F-16 training. I have an undergraduate degree from NC State in Recreational Park Administration, and the only useful time with that degree, he got my commission in the Air Force, and I went and flew airplanes, which is a load that I've had. Married, got 3 youngins, 5 grandkids. I don't live in the city, but I figured this would be an opportunity to get off my butt because I am retired. Makes no qualms about it.
More time to spend.
That's right.
Mr. Ransom.
George Ramsdale. I'm not a native from here. I've been here 10 years. I'm from Massachusetts, but I lived 26 years in Germany. I also am a prior military, Army. I know a little bit more than just military, though. No, but I work at the Floresville High School. I'm in college. I'm in my field base right now, which means I only have just 1 more semester to go. And I take my state test and become a certified teacher. I've been working at the high school for 9 years. I work with behavior. And I've also been, since I've been here, I've been on other committees. I've been on the 4A 2 different times, 3 times, I can't remember. And so I'm now on the Parks. And I contribute a lot. I try to at least.
Richard Halliburton. I'm born and raised here in Floresville. I've lived away from here a couple of years, but the rest of the time been either in Floresville or right here in this area. Know a lot of people here. My grandparents grew up here, and of course my dad and all his family. I currently teach for the Early College Center at the high school for Owl Colleges. I'm an adjunct instructor. I do the aerospace program there. I've been doing this as the 4th year for that. And prior to that, I have 2 degrees, one in electronics and one in aviation. So I've done a lot of electronics and robotics programming. I used to work for Toyota Motor Manufacturing before they built, and I actually programmed most of their large robots in their facility. And I've also worked in automotive and aerospace and aviation, kind of in a mix in back in my history, and some electronics applications too. I currently live here in the city of Floresville, here in Olympus.
Cindy Cranston. I'm the former vice president of the Floresville Chamber of Commerce, former second vice president of the Floresville Lions Club. I like to volunteer. I ran a successful real estate business here in Floresville for about 6 years. Recently, I went to work for a new home builder, so I've kind of shifted my focus. But I still wanted to be involved in the community. So when this opportunity, this is something that when we were on the Chamber of Commerce and she was running for mayor, we talked about quite a bit. So just want the opportunity to continue. I served 4 years in the Air Force. Was married to a career Air Force husband that retired in October. and I was a military brat, so I've lived that life my whole life. I'm a transplant here. I was born in Coleman, Alabama. Huge Alabama Crimson Tide fan. That's it, that's me.
I'm Jonelle Pipes. I was born and raised here. My dad's family is from here. I do not live in the city. I live outside of the city, but in Wilson County, of course. And I have 2 businesses here. I own Blue Casa Village, which is now between La Quinta and Best Western. I lease out those buildings, as well as I have ruffled feathers in the Blue House. Let's see, I have been on the Friends of the Library Committee. I don't know how many years, but we did that. We fundraised for our local library for many years, raised a lot of money, and have 2 children, married, have 2 children. They're little, and that's about it.
Well, I'm Michelle Talley, and I'm married to Jason Talley. We have a business, Talley Benefits, next to Trail Riders. And I grew up in Austin, but both of my parents are from Floresville, and of course Jason was born and raised here in Floresville. And I graduated from Southwest Texas with a degree in business marketing. And I did a lot of, did the same fundraisers with Friends of the Library, and we did that for about 13 years. I don't even remember. And so, a lot of years, and got 2 kids, one at A&M and one here in middle school, so.
Thank you. And I want to thank all of y'all for taking on this responsibility, okay? And we're here to support you and whatever help you need, okay? I want to state that right off the bat, okay? So you'll find that if you ever talk to me and you tell me you have time, I'm going to take advantage of that. Because I believe in giving back. And I know that a lot of people in the city really believe in doing that, but it's never been us. And I'm not afraid of that. So let's see. I don't know. Okay, Tom.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to pass it to Lee for the history and the documentation of the.
Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit about me first, since
yeah.
you didn't ask me.
Everybody knows who.
I know you all know me mostly as city attorney, but Emmett Browder and I started the R&R breakfast deal with the Wilson Area Housing Foundation about 14 years ago, after some friends of ours had a house burned down, and then the trailer they moved to burned down. And we started that when I had a little Ranchito down Slaughterhouse Road, west of Poe. Sonny and I moved down here right at 20 years ago. It'll be 20 years ago this June, July. We lived in the north side of San Antonio for, I think, a year after we got married. My first experience with Floresville goes back to '68, when I was working for the River Authority, and I had to do the elections in the 4 counties down here, Wilson, Karnes, Goliad, and Bear. And of course, Sarah's still going and still has elections. And I've always had a fond view of Floresville long before we moved here. But when we shopped around San Antonio, quite frankly, everybody was moving north, and we decided to move south since it was sort of sane, and we didn't have to fight I-10 or 35 or one of the other roads. And back then it was pretty, and it still is pretty, but it's changing rapidly. We all know that. Just a parenthetical part, both my parents were teachers, and when I was growing up, both of them took their summer courses at St. Marcus. So for me, San Antonio was a second home. And that's probably not significant except for the fact that I grew up on Indian reservations in Arizona and New Mexico, where we get 4 inches of rain. And I was actually born on Fort Apache. I'll let you take the rest of it, guess where the arrow is. But I grew up in a very different culture. Went to school in Utah, in Monument, at a Presbyterian high school, because we didn't have a high school. And then came to Trinity as Tom Slick was putting the slabs together. And at that time, I could tell Dad I would make extra money to pay for the difference between Trinity and the University of New Mexico. I couldn't tell him that anymore. But anyway, we landed here. Mother had 2 sisters that were beauticians, and so I liked it school here, went off to Vietnam for a year, and came back to take a degree at St. Mary's. And I think the rest you know about. But I've done a lot of community work, a lot of work in the Wilson area, and when my daughter Sarah was on at Sacred Heart, I got conned into getting on the board and became the president of the board. And I think I'm the only Methodist president of a Catholic school that ever existed. But anyway, that's enough there.
And you have the cowboy breakfast coming up real soon, right?
Right, April 27th. And we'll be doing it at the campus of the Sacred Heart. So, anyway, my interest in parks and recreation go back a long time because where I grew up, we didn't have them. And I was very interested in it when we first had the opportunity to put one together because I thought at the time that this could be something that was self-actuated or self-activated. There's some parts of the city that are undeveloped. Jesse's Park Trail was partially a stimulus to me. And we built, in the meanwhile, 4 houses in the city. And the ones on C Street all back on the trail. And we were very interested in that as a selling point. I think Floresville has many, many opportunities to develop its configuration as an interesting city. And P&Z is going to exploit that some. But I think parks are one of those key points for hot South Texas that was left unutilized. And one negative comment is that you mostly, I'm sure most of you know better than I, that what we call Pecan Park used to be a lake, for those of you that know the history, and most of the trees there now are pretty much on the decline. Pecan trees take over 5 years to recover from the drought, and they have not been maintained, and not been watered, and not been sustained now for almost 10 years. So it's a good example of a piece of our recreation where there's some immediate need, but just let it go there. There's lots to do. I hope that's enough.
No, we need to talk to them about
Oh, okay.
how the foundation was created.
Okay, what we did is we created a 501c3. You've got some of the organizational documents, I won't do this from memory. A 501c3 is a charitable organization. It's designed so that businesses can do one of 2 things. Well, businesses normally will take an advertising write-off to contribute to 501c3 because they actually get a little greater tax benefit by doing it as an advertising gimmick than they do as a charity. Individuals get a better rate of charitable contribution. But the idea was to get the business community plugged into this, to take pieces of land that were already available or that could become available and somehow weave them together into a parks community. We didn't have the view at the time that it would be necessary to cluster in one place. In fact, probably just the opposite. There would be smaller parks relating to the communities that they were adjacent to, maybe with a hiking bike trail being a connecting link. Maybe, not necessarily. But it seemed a logical way to go. We had a couple meetings. There wasn't a lot of stimulus from the membership at the time to kind of get it up and rolling. Unfortunately, it's probably a lot like our Wilson Area Housing Foundation. Somebody has to kind of pick it up and do the ramrod, kind of lay out a vision for what you want to do first, second, and third. And if you've got some professional training in that area, it's something we didn't have at that time, and that would be very useful. But there's areas up in the Northcrest area that could be available for development and connecting to the park. There's the Sonic area for soccer that the city has a commitment on, that we'll maintain the cemetery in consideration to Masonic Lodge, making all the rest of that property available. We've got areas that I want to mention, the common park, and I think there's an area, small area down near the Veterans Home, if I remember right, but I may be wrong on that. Yeah, a small area that could be a park. But anyway, there's lots of space to develop. So it's kind of your vision on, you know, where you want your kids to play or where you want to play. And then obviously there's the old Tally City Park, and then there's the Alma City Park that you all know collectively as the Floresville River Park, I think. And we've been trying to get those connected up 97 now for a couple of years, just so that they'll be in one piece. I think that's all I can
Yeah.
constructively commit.
In your package, you have the certification which created the foundation. It tells you what you can do, what you can't do. So that's going to be something for y'all to read on your own time before your next meeting.
Yeah,
So
let
y'all-
me, if I may, let me tell you something that's kind of badly, we started this in 2010, it's 13 now, and we had to kind of fictionalize, I'm using a word artfully, we had to kind of fictionalize the budget to the IRS about what we were going to do. So please don't feel like that budget is locked into stone. Simply, we had to put something down as a guess. If any of you done this kind of stuff before, you gotta put down something that a bureaucrat will approve, and you put your best guess down. So please don't feel bound to these numbers or bound to the budget. It's time we probably revised them, or put it better, updated them, depending on what we think we can do. But we have not reported to the IRS, and so far I've not heard from them about having to fill out the new Form 990. We preceded the 990 reporting. So, and I didn't mean to interrupt, but the IRS side of it is overdue for some reporting that I don't like to report to the IRS on nonprofits until their bid is required. Because they'll want another 5-year budget, and then we'll be floundering for what are we going to project. That's not to be deceitful, that's just the reality is it's hard to come up with a budget until you really have a chance to come up with some plans.
Anybody have any questions for you?
Well, when you talk about budget, where do the funds come from?
The donations. They're intended to be donations. After we got it started, the mayor had the idea of this $1 a head that's supposed to appear on your water bill. And I'm not positive that I know where that $1 a head was going and when it got started, because about the time we talked about the $1, the foundation kind of went into disuse type of situation. And I haven't been to a meeting here for probably
It's going to
close
be
to
fund.
2 years.
The fund that it's in is something to do with Parks and Recreation.
Right.
Because it also covers the cemeteries and stuff
Right.
like that.
Right.
So that's where that is.
But I'm not aware of where that money's
Yeah, I
gone.
need to pull out and get a budget to see what.
With the city
that is.
comptroller,
Yeah.
She
know
should.
what's there, so we, as a group, will know, do we have a balance, or when to black, when to red?
Well, I don't think anything's been spent, so, or at least I'm not aware that anything's been spent.
I
so
can
she-
have her email that to everybody so that y'all have it.
Okay, and then the second question, is that money that would be for foundation use, is it separate or tied into the Parks and Recreation Department's O&M funds?
I don't know how the manager has handled the money in terms of budgeting, okay? Originally, the idea was that this group, something like the 4A, and I don't mean to be trying to make an analogy that's necessarily fits, but something like the 4A would be the guiding light for the plan, and maybe working with city staff to say this is what we want done.
After 3 years of, or 3 separate maintenance squadrons, as a squadron commander, so 6 years as a commander, knowing how the federal monies are labeled. And there's some things you can do, some things you go to jail for.
Right.
And that's one of those things that I would be very interested in seeing, is that, you know, as a group, what are our legal limitations? What can we do? What, you know, warn us so that we don't end up going to jail.
Well, I think the city council has got to include your money as part of its budgeting process. I don't think that, I know that. And then say what they're willing to let you do with the money or not. If the city doesn't want to give you any of that $1 money, then the 501c3 lets you go raise all your own. And to the extent, I would assume you'd want to report to the city on what your intentions are and where you want the city to match and where you want, for example, a roads crew to work with you or the hired parks crew to work with you or what you want to do on your own. But you're pretty much like, if you forgive me, the Boy Scouts. You've got to raise it, you got to build it, you got to clean it, and you got to maintain it.
I sold a lot of greeting cards in the Boy Scouts.
So it really was set up as a, you know, quasi-city function, but it's not in the charter. You're kind of off over here. And the best thing I know to tell you is ex-military type. It's kind of like the recreation, not the, what's it, the wealth, give me the word for it. What?
MWR.
Yeah,
Or
MWR.
welfare.
And the only problem is the source of funding is not as clear.
Well, sometimes we had to beat the Wing King up to get that dollar
Yeah, I
per
know.
person.
Yeah. But I mean, it's basically what we want to raise. And I think you're gonna have to do an annual fundraiser of some sort, and I think you're gonna have to come up with some plans that you can sell to your public. And initially, you probably need to start pretty small.
In that package, there's, on the articles, it tells you on there what you can do and what you can't do.
Yeah.
So once you glance through there, you'll get a better picture of it.
Well, I don't know if anybody else was privy to it, but I came in, I guess Wednesday after Christmas and met with Andy. And I guess this was what you guys had put together for that December 10 meeting. And it even tied back in, I think the last section of it deals with Sarah, at San Antonio River Authority. And there's a lot of initiatives, whether or not it ever came to fruition. So they talked about that they were, the Parks Foundation was going to adopt a wellness initiative and try to tie health
And they did
and
the
wellness.
first year, I think they did a walk, and we had 3 people attend.
And that's where it starts.
And that's kind of where
That's
it
what
stops.
That's the,
But the wellness initiative really fits us well. I mean, there's lots of reasons to do that. We could piggyback with the Conley, you could piggyback with the school, you could piggyback with the senior citizens, you could piggyback with the Vita. I mean, we've got all the pieces here in the community. The Vita gave the Wilson Area Housing Foundation $1,000 the other day for our annual fundraiser for what we do. They've got money that they give out. They're giving out $1 million a year nationwide. There are other organizations that do that. Our thought initially on the wellness thing was when 2-3 years ago, when it was, UT Health Science Center announced that we were kind of having an epidemic of diabetes, and particularly early age or early onset diabetes was particularly difficult. And so we were going to kind of key into that, or at least that was part of the thought process, and support the existing sports and do some things for some seniors and some middle-aged types. And those of us that are ex-military that need to become reconditioned.
any questions, sir?
It's a wide open deal,
Yeah,
okay?
you can
I mean,
almost
there's
do
nothing that's fixed. But the one thing that you mentioned about Sarah, I need to key in on. Sarah did a parks plan for up and down the basin, and we adopted that as the city's parks plan, at least for the purpose of making an application to Parks and Wildlife. We did make the application to Parks and Wildlife, and it coincided with the last budget cycle, and the last budget cycle, they got whacked so bad, they sent it back to us and said, don't bother us.
I met with them 2 weeks ago, and I told them that we were just gonna start meeting, and they're willing to come and talk to y'all about like the erosion and all those issues that are all around there and what
Sarah.
they can do.
So,
And also because there's that paddling that I didn't even know existed. It starts, I think, ends in Suspamco, I think. And the reason that I asked that question was because in Goliad, they recently helped them set up like the paddling thing where it connects and everything else. And they were talking about that maybe possibly that could be extended and
Yeah, I
stuff.
heard it was going to.
So I told them that that was something that they needed to come and talk to y'all, so that y'all could talk about it and think.
At this point, what have we done as a city to shore up the erosion there? Anything at all, or we just, is that what our purpose is here? I mean, I know that's part of our purpose.
That's part of it, and there's a lot of money that's gonna be needed, because I believe the primary issues start with the event center and how the water drains. So you have to fix that before you can actually touch the fields, according to the engineer. So we're trying to get a copy of that last engineer's report so that we know exactly, so that we know what we have to do. I know there's a retention pond that needs to be put into the back, because there's a lot of land to the back, and it's like that drainage right there behind the pool. You know, we have two options. We can either, according to Sarah, we could take it and take it out to the street and let it go out that way, but that's gonna involve TxDOT. And if any of you have ever worked with TxDOT, I think it's gonna have to be the second option, which is letting it go to the back, and they'll have to like make a ditch, I guess, sort of, so that the water will flow. And back in the back of the fields to the, there's that big field on the right, in the back there's a bunch of land. There's already a small retention pond there, so they just need to fix it, so that then the water will trickle down into the river, and it bypasses all those erosion issues. So, I mean, I know that the Little League goes through a lot of trouble every year, and they're fixing to start working on it, where they go and they cover all those holes that they have out there. But we can't really touch fixing that to get this other part. And you're talking about an excess of 35 to 50,000 just to get started on that. So it is being discussed. It's not at the top of the list, but it will be eventually. You know, so there's a lot of things that we have to put all the pieces of the puzzle together to know where we need to start.
Well, one other thing, we didn't talk about it specifically with that document there, but Los Cabros was in K. Bailey Hutchison's bill. I lost track of it about the time she said she wasn't going to run for office. But that's part of the National Parks plan, is to have Los Cabros partially, I'm not sure how much, rebuilt or at least reconfigured so you can see the outlines of the buildings. And I guess most of you know that the Cibolo on the east and the San Antonio on the west constituted the most verdant land back then, and that the senderos that go through Bentwood and other places were where the cowboys and the sheep and the goats went back and forth between the two basins. And so the actual function of raising goats and cattle down here for the missions all was real. And so one of the ideas of getting Los Cabros back up and working, at least where you can visually see it and see how it's connected, is a very real way of maybe connecting to the greater community. And it ties in rather well with Pleasanton being the capital of the Vaqueros, and ties in with Gonzales being the beginning of the Prison Trail. I mean, there's lots of ways that recreation and that history tie together.
Okay, and then on to new business. Consideration and action to elect officers. So you need your chairman, vice president, secretary, and treasurer.
I'd like to nominate Mr. Jones over here for president.
Can I decline?
He's already taken charge, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Got a lot of knowledge.
The military
Have a good
experience,
background.
yeah, he's retired,
Do
so
I
it
hear the
gives him the
train?
time.
Mr. Jones? You accept?
Yes, ma'am, I will. I'll do it for a year
Thank
at least.
Now we need the vice. Chairman.
Just turnabout fair play.
Yeah.
I'll do that, I can do vice, but not
There
president.
you go.
You'll have to vote on that, Mayor, or it's just, since no one else, it's uncontested, right?
Do we have to
Well,
vote on everything, or
if
can we
you
vote
wanna
it all
do it by
together?
consent.
We can do it by consent. Okay, I nominate Mr. Jones for president.
Okay.
Who's second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
I
Aye.
abstain.
And Mr. Jones? You want to vice? Make the motion.
I so nominate.
Cindy Cranston.
Cindy
Vice
Cranston.
President.
Cindy Cranston. As the Vice President of the Forestville Parks Foundation Incorporated.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Now we need.
None opposed.
None opposed. Now we need a secretary. Now nomination.
I'm gonna nominate Michelle Talley sitting over there.
Do I have a second?
I second that. Make it easy.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Now, treasurer, do I have a motion?
I have a question first. Does anybody at this table have experience as a treasurer with QuickBooks or any of those type of programs? Oh, I know someone.
Yeah. Business owner.
Laughing.
I'm not laughing.
Business owner, I think she was.
Does anyone else? Does anyone else? Does anyone else?
And staff will help you with that here, okay? You just get together with the controller and she'll say.
I'm not for it there, but it's a tough position.
It is.
It's been through
I
a
don't
lot with
wanna-
other organizations.
Yeah.
You do
Treasurer
have a
is
separate EIN because it's required that you get one. So at some point you need to determine how to handle the money as a separate account, as a separate piece of accounting.
Well, I was gonna say how we handled the Friends, you know, we were working under the library, the Sam 4 Library, which is a county entity.
Right.
But yet, we were the fundraising part, we were the
Mhm.
Friends of the Library. So we had a 501c3, we filed every year.
Mhm.
We had our separate EIN number, we did all that, and we kept our Friends of the Library books
Right.
on QuickBooks, and we had, you know, all that. And then
Well,
we
that's-
distributed our funds to the library on a annual basis.
Mhm.
We gave money.
That's pretty
and then-
much the same program. Yeah.
And then at the end, when we concluded, we donated to all the schools
Right.
our excess money, which was like $80,000 at the end. 80,000.
So does that mean they're accepted?
So I nominate Ms. Jonelle Pipes as treasurer.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I hope not.
Mine too.
I'm gonna get somebody else.
He's a business owner in
Motion
town, and
carries.
he's, yeah.
Like I said, you can talk with Laura, because we're doing the event center financing, so I'll see what they would have.
Okay.
And then, next is consideration and act to set your regular meeting date, okay? Y'all have the option of meeting more than once a month if y'all need to get together and plan and whatever, that's up to y'all, okay? Or at least once a month.
I'd like it to be a Wednesday, that's the only thing I request. My days off are only Wednesday and Thursday, and I work late into.
Don't you have planning and zoning on Wednesdays?
But that would not affect us. Would affect them.
But don't they use the same one?
We can use
And
it
it's
on
not,
chambers.
it's not every Wednesday, is it?
No,
Just once a month.
it's up to
Okay.
us, once a month on Wednesday.
So if y'all want, y'all can do the Wednesday, I think they do the first Wednesday.
They're
of
the
month.
first Wednesday of every month.
So y'all can do the second planning and zoning.
Planning and zoning
Can we
is
do
first
third
Wednesday.
Wednesday? Would anybody mind that?
It's all easy to me. My question would be, who, other than the 7 of us, who else would be
Well, it
regular
gets posted,
participants?
so anybody from the community that wants to come are more than welcome to come in.
Okay, but do we need you and Lou at the same time frame?
Not
No,
necessarily.
Lou was here because it's the first time and to go over the role and explain the history of the Parks Foundation and stuff, so you would be on your own.
But if we need him, he'll advise us.
If you want.
Okay.
And then, if you need someone from the staff to be there, we can be there.
Like I said, I'm retired, so whatever benefits the 6.
I'm good with second or third Wednesday. I mean, it's whoever votes. Wednesday just works the best for my schedule.
Usually I have trouble with college, but I have online classes, so I don't care this time.
So y'all want the third or the fourth Wednesday?
Third Wednesday is fine with me.
Yeah.
That's okay, everybody else. Let's meet at least once a month unless there's some special issue,
And
we
then
call
y'all can
special
call
meeting
another meeting.
if we need
We
to.
can call it.
I propose that we do the third Wednesday then.
Okay.
So it is the second.
Sounds good.
Not that it matters to y'all, but that's really convenient for me also. So
Yeah, we'll do it for him.
Next Wednesday,
it's really good.
um,
The third Wednesday would be the 19th, the 16th. I'm sorry, the 13th of February.
Yeah, 20.
20th, I'm sorry.
20th of February.
And the next would be 20 March too. Yeah.
That's 1 week where I wouldn't have any meetings to attend. So that's-
Okay, so then your next meeting would be Wednesday, February the 20th. And we will send you the notices like we've been sending you the emails. You won't be getting the call from me. It's just
So
a one-timer.
We'll work that through, Sherry,
Yes.
okay, because,
And if you have things you want to put on your agenda,
well, I was gonna ask Lou. Andy also gave me that, Lou, and as you can tell, I've scribbled all over it. That's our charter. It was never finished. Was, to your recollection, has that been completed? And if it hasn't, then we probably ought to get information, because it's got typos in it, it's got some things in there, like for instance, it says that the committee shall have a member of the Park and Recreation Division here as a member. And I don't know if anybody asked them to come. There's one place in there, it says that the city county will do something, but it means to say the city council. And there's, numerous typos, but that's something that we need to really look at and fine tune.
Is that in here?
Well, then I've got a
yes, it
conflict,
is.
It
It
is.
is in here.
I've got a conflict, policy in here, and I don't know that ever got adopted either.
So maybe our first meeting, we need to go over the bylaw
Yeah.
charter and bylaws
Yeah,
and,
just
and make
start.
corrections and then adopt them after.
so what you can do is you can call Sherry Pollock and you can tell her what you would like to have on your agenda.
And I can pull out stuff in here that's incomplete, give it to you.
Because I think for us, it looks like that none of the names on the old list are anybody new, and unless I'm speaking in turn here, I think that we gotta look at our rules of order, how we're gonna work. I think we need to know what the budget is, what our status is in the budget.
I'll get you your budget.
I'll come in and see, now right now she's busy with the audit and all going on. Because I think we need to get the audit, we meet again next Monday.
You might find this interesting. This was an effort to pull some information together on diabetes when we were focused in that area.
Okay. And is this the only copy?
I'm sure I've got copies of.
I have a couple of questions. As Parks Foundation, will that set us up for people when they, like, my church, for instance, during Easter leases out Pecan Park for their big Easter festival? Does that set us up with that, or will people still continue to go through the city for those things?
For use of parks, I think they go through the
They
city.
still
I would be on that.
Because it's like the event center, it also gets booked out.
Because we don't want to hang
The
out.
swimming pool and all that,
I'm
yeah.
making sure.
They'd be calling you all the time for
Yeah.
parties and stuff, and that's when you.
I'm trying to gauge what we just got into. The full amount.
Can I see the book?
The one that,
Let me see what it is.
find in that third document, they even talk about a biking trail along some dilapidated railroad
No,
that they were
that's
going
what
to
I'm
convert
talking
it.
about, the hiking bike trail.
See, that's the thing I'd like to get up to speed too, that there's one picture in there that, say a good picture's worth 1,000 words, where it actually shows the parks. And not being a resident of the city, it would behoove me then that, go jump in and go around. And, I've listened to the cemetery guy talk about his cemetery and the number of times where, he didn't know how grass got cut, how it got taken care of, and y'all have mentioned tonight that.
And that's something we can set up, I can get someone for the Parks Department that does maintain all the parks to come in and give you all a report and tell you how often, because, I just recently asked about Pecan Park, how often were the bathrooms checked and all the lighting and all that. And it's supposed to be on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Well, I didn't know that, so when somebody complains and tells me that the bathroom's not working, then I'll do an order, we do a work order, and the same thing that y'all could do also is request a work order for them to go and repair something that is not.
I think
Because I hear Lou say that
Okay.
10 years of neglect, I know that there's a line item for I think y'all call it M&O, I call it O&M money for operational maintenance. Where was the city, why didn't they water, why haven't they fertilized, why haven't they cut? They're all type things that
I think it would be very beneficial to get some kind of report on the conditions of all of our parks, so that we know everything.
And we
that's
also need
going on.
Mr. Hopkins to come in, and I'll get y'all a copy of the last contract that we have with the city, with the Little League and the Wildcats, as to what responsibility the city has. I know that one of them is that they put in all the labor and the city pays for the materials like fertilizing, or they need dirt or whatever, the city provides that, and they do all the labor.
It'd just be interesting to know the condition of everything, because I know some of the parks, there's potties that are torn up.
Oh, yes,
and-
and that's been reported for a couple
yeah.
of years, and nothing
No,
has
has been
ever
done.
been done.
So-
The door was falling off last year.
Yeah.
So, and that's a hazard when you're going in there with little children and the doors coming out.
But it would just be nice to have an item by
Yeah.
item line.
Or even the
list.
shape of the equipment, like the
Yeah.
slide or something,
Yeah.
it has a bin
The
or
safety,
whatever.
it's a safety.
Well, I could in the next agenda, I'll touch base with Andy and see if he won't handcuff the Park and Recreation Director, if there is such a person,
We don't
and
have
have-
one per se, but there is one that heads the department right now.
and just have him, ask for a little 10-minute dissertation
Yeah,
on
just
what
with
you
the
girls have talked
condition.
about,
And then when y'all want to hear from Sarah, y'all let me know, and I can set it up, I'll forward you their information, and you can directly set that up if you want.
Well, that would be nice because with Little League,
Because they'll give you the map and they'll give you everything.
when they're out there every day and the trash cans are overflowing, when you go show up at 5 o'clock for a 6 o'clock game and they're supposed to be cleaning every day, people are complaining, there's bees, the toilet, there's no toilet, what are they supposed to be doing? Are they supposed to, well, that's that leak that, yes, and Mr. Jocelyn knows about it.
And it sounds like there's no follow-up to.
So, are they cleaning every day? Are they every other day? So it'd be nice to kind of know.
But the problem with him, he wants to have a key to the field, right? Mr.
Mr. Hopkins?
There's only a gate.
I mean, because he said that he wanted to control the baseball field.
Well,
for
if
his-
he's gonna maintain everything,
for
he
his
wanted,
kids.
if he was gonna take care of everything, then he wanted access because he's maintaining everything. And if they were gonna mow and buy mowers and do all that and not have the city do that, is what I understood him to say.
And then also, what I'm gonna get you is that copy of that contract, so that it says on there everything that they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do.
Because remember, he let the
And
little
then
league
that-
play there, the little girls.
That contract can also be updated, okay?
He let the little league girls play in there because it was his field.
The other thing I just want to mention, this letter, I'll hand you a copy of it, but it doesn't say much, but about the time Dr. Vincent was considering moving elsewhere, I had bumped into him at the Arcadia one evening, and we were talking about that initial concept. And he was very interested in getting the school to be a major committed player in developing parks and recreation and getting some of the student organizations and some of the student activities plugged in.
I think Dr. Hunkapiller would probably be as open.
I think
He's
so,
been
I just
very
don't happen to
receptive.
know it.
Yep.
So I know him, so online.
And-
stuff
But
too.
that was one of the places we were looking for, people power.
We
And
Because they all need community hours, so it's very
We also
easy to
need
get
to,
them.
we also need to look at civic organizations like the Leos have done a tremendous job with the park that they've renovated and added to. There's other organizations out there too that may want to be more involved or could be more involved.
Well, and there's one other organization, please don't turn me off just for suggesting that, but you have about 100 people in the community given at any one time that are doing community service. And I realize some of them are felons, I realize some of them are not felons, I realize some of them are in some condition of being rehabilitated. But there used to be, and Mayor, I'm not sure exactly how the sheriff is supervising this now, but I know we've got an adult probation office, and we use them at Sacred Heart to repaint our buildings. We use them in a couple places to do some work. And they got 100 hours to do to satisfy the judicial system, and 100 hours of work times 100 people
So we expend it.
is a lot of free work. So for maintenance.
I know Judge Sheila
Mhm.
also has
Yes.
that,
I
and
was-
that's usually where the tickets where they can't pay them.
Last
And they
year,
don't
I
allow
started
them to
with
work
Sheila,
out.
and we were doing the community service through the high school,
Mhm.
where I would get a student that needed to do community service, and that she referred to me. And I was, at that time, I was one of the sponsors for the junior Crime Stoppers at the high school, and I was putting the work through that. And then when I had the idea that I was trying to get on the Parks and Foundation, that I was hoping that I could probably put some of those students like cleaning up parks or doing certain things.
Painting
Yeah, you know, so, I mean, I had that with Sheila, and I also started getting some students from Sarah Kennedy. So, I mean, so I was doing that there for
So
a
I mean,
while.
that's a workforce for something like the Pecan Orchard that can do some of the really rudimentary stuff.
Well, in the last 5 minutes, y'all have mentioned 4 names that I have never heard before in my life till right now. So I'm gonna ask the other 6 of you guys, y'all that live here, you know these names. So my email address is dougnjones@hotmail.com.
That's why she.
I'm on Facebook.
Well, it might be good just to get an email for everybody.
Because I put it on that volunteer application.
If you can just check to make sure that all your information's correct too, so if we have to correct it.
Well, my name is spelled wrong, but I'm fine with
What's the correct spelling of your name?
it. Ramsdale is RAMSDELL.
D.E. Deborah?
Just like your
Now
email.
say that in your
Mine is
email.
double.
My email's right.
I mean, double L.
Yeah, the email's
So
right.
it's
D-E-double-L?
It's A-L.
Yes, on the email.
Okay, who else?
But that's what's.
Jonelle has 2 L's.
E-L-L-E?
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am, I got you.
Thank you.
Anybody else is misspelled? No? Okay.
Did you ever go on the name, Jen?
Yes, I do.
All right.
I actually used to be a bus monitor when I was
Okay, so for the first meeting, I think you'll already
And
have a
Jen
lot.
and Justin and
Yeah.
Nico,
Your
right?
next one.
well, I knew Jessica.
I made myself some notes to get the budget, you know, the bylaws that y'all are gonna be looking at, right? They're in your packages. I copied the Little League contract so that y'all know what y'all are up against there. And like we said, if it needs to be reworked, tweaked, y'all can do that.
And then the Parks and Recreation.
And then I'm gonna send y'all the Sarah, San Antonio River Authority information so that y'all can set up. And they gave us a very good presentation. They don't have any funds, but they can tell you what they can do or how, or you can get grants and stuff, which you can apply for.
So I need to talk with Sherry about reservation for a recurring meeting.
I'll go ahead and tell them you're gonna be doing the third Wednesday. I don't know if this room is real.
Another thing I can say, whenever it comes to the part where we're gonna need any kind of information or advice on like Little League fields, football fields, soccer, whatever, I have the coaches at the high school ready to come in and give us advice. I have the head baseball coach, which is really familiarized with all the baseball fields around, and then the football coaches, soccer coaches. So whatever we need, all the coaches in the high school are ready to for our disposal.
And Mr. Hunkelfeller has
Is
said.
Coach
Yes.
Smith the head coach
No, the AD right now is Coach Luna.
now?
Lou, a legal question for you. With 7 being the number currently, if we get the parks, or the city parks guy, that would be 8. With the open meeting law, if we were to get together, say, go out to see the parks, how many, if 2
Well,
of us
I
get
mean,
together?
theoretically, if you're not doing decision-making, we don't need to worry about it, but, if you've got a planned event, my preference is for you just post it, you're gonna be out there breaking leaves, if it's a big event, but for anything you're not making decisions on, you don't really need to post.
Okay,
I'm
so if
just
we-
conservative about it. I prefer that if you think you're gonna make some decisions out there incidentally to what you're doing, that you post that you're gonna have a relief rating event, and you just act like you're having a meeting. And it's easy enough to do because that's what the secretary gets, city secretary gets paid for, or whatever. But it's not hard to post.
In 72-hour notice, right?
Yeah. And that way, nobody can criticize you for making some decisions while you're out there about some other parts.
I think what,
Because we know that doesn't happen here in Floresville, ever.
So,
So, and you want me to get somebody from the parks? Yeah, from the report, right, so they were gonna
To
give
come
us a
in
report.
and to tell you a little bit on each part.
Okay.
That would be Alex Pirino.
Oh, okay.
you might find this interesting. I dug that out of,
I can get these back to you.
yeah, you can give that back to me, but just for everybody's benefit, what I'm handing him something is an article from 1960 or 61, and I don't know if some of you probably laugh at me, but I remember when John Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy got elected, one of their big deals was to get us off our flaggy pads. And they weren't worried about diabetes at the time, but they were worried about other events, and you remember that.
Well, I mean, for the parks in San Antonio, they do that National Day Out, where
Yes.
basically everybody brings their skateboards and bicycles and goes to the parks and the
Mhm.
streets. I mean, something like that would be real easy to incorporate here in Floresville,